Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Welcome to Living the Gospel of Life. I'm your host, Leticia Velasquez. We have a wonderful guest today, Patty Maguire Armstrong, and she's going to join us in a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
And the Holy Spirit. Amen.
O Mary, bright dawn of the new world, Mother of the living, to you do we entrust the cause of life. Look down, O Mother, upon the vast numbers of babies not allowed to be born, of the poor whose lives are made difficult, of men and women who are victims of brutal violence, of the elderly and sick killed by indifference or out of misguided mercy. Grant that all who believe in your Son may proclaim the gospel of life with honesty and love to the people of our time. Obtain for them the grace to accept that gospel as a gift ever new, the joy of celebrating it with gratitude throughout their lives, and the courage to bear witness to it resolutely, in order to build together with all people of goodwill the civilization of truth and love to the praise and glory of God, the Creator and Lover of life. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. So
Amen.
Amen. Isn't that a beautiful prayer? That's our dear
Yes,
St. John Paul II. He covers everything in just a couple of paragraphs. Patty Maguire Armstrong is a correspondent for our Sunday Visitor newspaper and the National Catholic Register. She's an award-winning author and the managing editor and co-author of Ascension Press's best-selling Amazing Grace series. Her latest books are Big-Hearted, Inspiring Stories from Everyday Families, and Dear God, You Can't Be Serious. She's appeared on EWTN, Catholic TV, Fox and Friends, and numerous radio programs across the country. Patty studied a year of journalism at University of Detroit, has a BA in social work and an MA in public administration, and worked in both these fields before staying home to work as a freelance writer. She and her husband met in the Peace Corps in the Marshall Islands, Micronesia. They now live in North Dakota, and where they're still raising the tail end of their 10 children. Well, that's quite a list of accomplishments, Patty, for someone with 10 kids.
Well, little by little, day by day, you get a thing done or two, and it adds up.
I'm being slightly ironic. Before we started the show, Patty and I were discussing French President Macron's comment that women with 8+ children were not properly educated. So Patty has a master's degree, was in the Peace Corps, has worked in her fields, and is the author of how many books altogether? 11?
I'd have to. Well, yeah, they're not all still in print, and so probably I've done 12 altogether, and I have a new one coming out in February with
tell
Ave Maria. Yeah, it's called I got to make sure I get the title right. It's called Holy Hacks. Holy Hacks. You know how life hacks
yeah.
are so popular.
Mm-hmm.
So this is called Holy Hacks.
Holy Hacks.
Everyday Ways.
I like it.
Yeah. So easy to remember. And then the subtitle is Everyday Ways to Live Your Faith and Get to Heaven.
That is great, because a lot of people consider that too lofty a goal, and they think they'll worry about it when they're almost in heaven, when they're very old. And not all of us make it that long. We need to start hacking away at it right now. So it makes it sound accessible. Holiness. It's
extremely accessible, and it's I got ideas. I have a whole chapter on a lot of well-known people sharing their ideas. And as I was working on this and thinking, and you know how it is, Leticia, you're a writer also. Once you start thinking, the wheels start to turn, and you come up with all these ideas. But I realize there are so many little things that we can do that don't really change our life very dramatic. They don't change our life much at all, but you're starting to live more and more for God. You're taking a moment, before you turn the key in your car, you say a little prayer. And this was a big deal for me. I did many, many years ago, having 10 children who are adopted. And so I went through 8 pregnancies. And whether you have to get up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night, or you have a child crying, and you have to get up and you're tired, usually you're like, oh boy, I have to get up. And I realized I should stop and count my blessings at that time. And I thought of women who are pregnant and don't have indoor plumbing and I have a son who works in Guatemala and helps the poor, people who sleep on floors, or, they have it tough. And I get to come to my nice warm bed, or I have to get up help take care of a child and I'm tired, but how many women would love to have a child they had to get up for, that they are infertile and they don't have children or they lost a child? And that instead of complaining, we should, I just think God's up in heaven looking down on us, and he's given us so many blessings, and sometimes we're complaining about the blessings that we have without realizing it. So
that's all I do. Definitely. That's a good reminder.
Yeah, and so holy hacks, that's just one example of starting to turn your life little by little, moment by moment, to God, to our blessings, and we start to live holy lives without doing a major overhaul. And I make the point, some people do have to do major overhauls. So they have serious, they're in darkness, and a lot of times they have a big conversion, and they do have to make big changes. But as you walk the journey and you're just trying to draw closer to God, we just need to keep adding little things here and there. And so it really isn't any extra work, but it's extra blessings in our life.
Well, as St. Paul says, pray always, and that can seem very daunting. But like you say, you do it one step at a time, one good habit at a time.
Right. Perfect. Yep. One good habit at a time.
Remind yourself that, your entire day does belong to God. And yes, especially as a mom, you have a million things to do, but you can do both. And not only that, but if you take the time to pray, even if it's intermittently, or maybe even because it's intermittently, things will get easier. It's because your attitude's better.
Right, and a lot of times we don't do things because, for instance, fasting, and that's something I always know I need to try work harder at. I'm not a complete failure, but I know I'm not anywhere near. And when you think about the power of fasting and all our prayer intentions, I always say, hey, why don't I just push myself a little bit more? But I often hear people say, oh, I can't fast. Well, I have hypoglycemia. I really have to be careful with my diet, and I am. But I realized what made it easier for me is that we can always be doing something in the line of fasting, and fasting is so powerful. For instance, don't put mayonnaise on your bread, or
that's right, a little self-denial, right?
Skip the fries, and so you're not going hungry.
Which is actually good for you. It is actually better for you, and so it's good for you, and it also helps you remember that you're fasting for an intention.
Or, you just make a little sacrifice at a meal. And when I read the lives of the saints, they were fasting beyond anything I do. And so I know I'm not a saint yet. But that's the goal. We want to.
But you're working in that direction.
And so sometimes I'm kind of hungry and making dinner, and I like to eat corn chips. I always have a bag of corn chips, and I'll just go, okay. I forced myself to walk away from the chips. And so I just denied myself a very little pleasure, not earth-shattering, but I fasted in some way, and we all have our prayer intentions that we want answered. So why not do just a little more to bring us closer to God? And also, it's a prayer, and any kind of sacrifice we make works like a prayer also.
That's right. That's right. As long as we offer it with the spirit of giving to God, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Don't waste it, and don't waste any sacrifices that come your way. I have intermittent back cramps, and I've through gritted teeth most times say, "Okay, Lord, I'm offering this for so and so that I've been praying for," and it does make it more bearable. I had a friend who passed away through cancer, and every time she's going for a painful treatment, she would offer it up for one of my intentions. It was heartbreakingly beautiful how much joy it brought this woman to suffer for the person I was praying for.
On the topic of suffering, I have a lot of holy hacks that address that. And I read, maybe a year ago, I read Jeff Caven's book, When You Suffer. And I love that book because it opened my eyes to all the suffering I was wasting, because he said even the low-level suffering, if we're sick or something very difficult has happened, we know, offer it up. I do. But what about the little things like, oops, as little as, I missed my turn. Darn it. Now I've got to turn back around. Offer those things up. And I realized after reading his book, and Jeff Cavins and I and Matt Pinto worked together on the Amazing Grace series with Ascension Press. And I really admire him, and he is always full of good advice. And I love that book of his, When You Suffer, because you realize there's so much spiritual collateral every day of your life that if you take a moment, and that's not, you're not doing anything beyond, I'm not giving you extra work to do, but it's more of a recognition, hey, I can offer this up instead of complaining because it happened anyway.
Right.
Complaining
You might
isn't
as well
going to
use
go
it.
away. Get something out of it. Yeah, offer it up for your prayer intentions. Offer it for your family, for your marriage, for somebody who's suffering from cancer, for yourself, whatever. But offer it up. Don't waste it.
St. Paul says we make up what's lacking in the suffering of Christ, and it sounds so heady to say, how could I possibly, how could there be something missing, first of all, in Christ's suffering? But what's missing is our participation. It is a gift to be invited to suffer with him, even if it is missing a turn, even if it is messing up a radio show, as I did last night, and Patty was so patient. I suffered from that. After you hung up, I was like, how could I mess that up? I had a quiet house all day long. Everything was all set up, and what did I do? I got jittery and dropped the microphone, and then the cord got lost, and then it was all downhill from there. And I said, you know what? That humiliation, that's something I can offer up. And not looking like an idiot, and that's something none of us relish very often.
Oh, yeah.
But it is a suffering, and I offer it.
You're too hard, and you're too hard on yourself because I didn't think you were an idiot, because maybe I'm an idiot too. I'm an idiot too, so I felt like, yep, I totally get it. That's what I would do.
It was an opportunity for you to feel better about some of the things that you've done. You never know what God's doing through the little things that happen in your life, and to be open to letting him use it for his glory. Like I was sharing on Facebook when I had you can hear my cough, I had 2.5 weeks of bronchitis where I was pretty much bedridden. It was a great time to pray and to read holy books instead of running around in the madness that Advent can become. And this has been a beautiful Advent, thanks to my retreat, I call it, when God makes me, I don't think he makes me sick, but he allows me to be sick to the point that I need to listen to him. I says, is this what it takes to get me to listen to you, Lord? The TV was broken in my room, I must add, otherwise I'd be watching old movies,
Which is not bad, too. I do that
it's not bad if
you... dad.
No, there's some beautiful movies, especially around Christmas time, but to the detriment of listening to God speaking in your life, anything that gets in the way of that.
Oh, absolutely.
It's the lesser thing.
Along those lines, like when we're sick and we offer it up, my friend and co-author, Teresa Thomas, we wrote Big-Hearted, Inspiring Stories from Everyday Families, where she had cancer after her 9th child, and she had a brother who I coincidentally sat at a table with him and found out it was her brother, because she's from Indiana.
I know, you guys are far.
Yeah, and I was at a Catholic Marketing Network, and I just happened to sit next to this man who was also there, and it turned out to be her brother. And he was the man who I was so inspired by, because he had cancer 3 times. And Teresa said, when he got it the 3rd time, he said, I can't wait to see what God is going to do with it this time.
Oh, how beautiful. Oh, he inspires me too then. Wow. I was wondering if I was there. I was at the time that you two met me, because you seem to have come together. And then I realized you're coming from very far apart. But you were together at that Catholic Marketing Network a few years ago. This is how Catholic writers meet.
As a matter of fact, that is when we were asked to write that book, Big-Hearted, Scepter Publishers. So we had not worked on a book together, but we had talked about it. And she had submitted some stories to the Amazing Grace series. And so that's how I knew about her. And I don't know why we talked about doing a book together, but somehow we did, because we had never even met until that conference. And so then I met her brother years later, two years ago. I didn't go last year, but 2 years ago when it was in Chicago. I sat at the table with him, and then I realized who he was. And I thought, wow, and God puts us together, because you don't have those kind of coincidences where you're sitting at a table by chance with your co-author's brother from another state who you loved to hear that story about him and admired him. And I thought, oh my gosh, I just want to tell you how I was so impressed by, that you had offered up your cancer and were even excited to see what God was going to do with it.
Wow, that's a heart that's really submitted to the Lord. That's beautiful.
Yeah,
and is really thinking about God's intentions first. And I had cancer too, and I was able to conquer it in my eye, and I learned a lot too. When you see your life possibly coming to an end, it gives you a real perspective on what's important in your lives. And God decided, as far as I can tell, it was 5 years ago, to let me live on and raise my daughter with special needs, 16. And I'm very grateful for that. But boy, it is definitely a learning experience to face your own mortality. I mean, we all are going to die, but we all think we're going to die 89 years old when everything's in our life is done. And I hope I never feel like it's all done. I hope I always see projects ahead.
I know. Every time there's turbulence on the plane, I get nervous, and I think, okay, I'm always, whatever your will is, Lord, I think, oh, but please, I really don't want to go down in this plane. I know. But then we all want to die in our sleep at 90 years old,
right.
But, we have to.
Unless you're 89 years old and your 90th birthday is tomorrow, then you go, wait a minute.
Yeah, how about let's make it 100? Yeah.
Let's go for 100, God. So tell us a little bit about you and your beautiful family, Patty. You met your husband in Micronesia. That's fascinating.
Yes, in the Marshall Islands. We were in the Peace Corps.
What were you doing? What was your project?
Well, I have a degree in social work, and I was a youth worker.
Wow.
And then I was. They said, "Well, so what are you going to do for us?" I thought, "What? I thought you guys had something for me to do." And so,
you had to design your own program, so to speak.
Well, yeah, but it's not supposed to work that way.
No, that's not what I thought either.
I think that just one person who requested a Peace Corps volunteer didn't really understand that you need to. Anyways, so what I did a couple things. I was asked to help teach first aid classes, which I don't have a background in that, but I sat together and I knew a little bit of Marshallese because they'd put us through a little bit of training to start, and they cooked on open fires, and so they had to. I talked about things like supervision of the children so that they weren't near the fires, and then in case of a fire, what you should do. And I had a big Red Cross first aid book, and I thought, well, I can impart a lot of this stuff. So I realized it wasn't something I couldn't do. But a big thing that I did, and this turned out to be huge on the island, is there was a men's softball league, and I was asked, it might have been baseball, I don't know if it's softball or baseball, but anyways, I was asked if I would do a women's softball league, which I did, and I am telling you, it became the biggest event of the week when the women got together and played. And normally there's more spectators at men's sports, but these women, they played in their dresses, and they were naturally athletic, and they were fiercely competitive, and it was extremely entertaining to the point, I have to dig up some pictures, I know I have, where everything would stop. The taxis would all stop. The Marshall Islands where we lived, it was a 30-mile-long island. It was an atoll. An atoll is like it used to, coral reefs form around volcanoes. Eventually the volcanoes sink, and then you have the reefs left, and that's your island. So this one was 30 miles long, and at its very widest point, I think it was a half a mile long. It was a very narrow. Wow. And so I think it was less than a mile long at the widest spot. So the taxis would go up and down, and for a quarter you could just jump in the taxi, and it would take you down the street wherever you wanted to go. So the taxis would stop. The field was just full of people watching, and the games would take place, and they were very entertaining. What I found, though, the Marshall Islands, the culture is they're very meek and mild. They don't confront people. And I had a hard time getting umpires because of that. Because
interesting.
Because
it can be confrontational.
Oh my gosh, the women were fierce. They played to win. They were very aggressive. It was very entertaining, and they were good. I mean, they were just naturally athletic. And so it didn't take much for them to pick up on it. And so I did have a Marshallese guy be my umpire once, and he was just horrified. And so they're so non-confrontational, they'll tell you they're going to show up, and then they don't show up because they don't want to tell you no. So after him doing it one time, he never wanted to do it again. So I actually had 2 Americans, including Mark, who we were already interested in each other, and he became my husband. So he was one of my umpires, and then I had somebody else because there were some expats that were from the United States and a few other countries, and so I got 2 people that were willing to do my umpire. So I did that, and I also taught an exercise class for the elderly. We played music, and they would dance, and we were outside. And once again, the taxis would all stop and watch these old people.
Well, they probably missed you there, Patty.
Well, we did. I don't know. I didn't plan it, but what I did ended up being high on the entertainment scale, even though it wasn't my plan. What was very funny is, this will reveal how old I am. Funky Town, the song Funky Town.
Right.
Was huge, and they played it all the time. I said, boy, this is like their national anthem. They had the discos, they'd play it, and you'd hear it all the time. Well, I got together some music to exercise with the seniors before their meals came. They had like senior meal type program. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, what kind of music would you like to listen to? And somebody requested Funky Town. So I've got all these old gray-haired people, the older generation.
I'm trying to picture this.
Up there, so I turned on Funky Town was one of our songs, and once again, people all stopped and they were watching, and
I can imagine.
It was
That's
so
adorable.
much fun, and they got to have fun because they didn't go to the discos, they didn't go to these places where there would be dancing, but with their exercise class, they got to stand up and dance and have fun listening to Funky Town. So anyways, nothing earth-shattering. I didn't save any lives, but I think I made life a little more amusing.
Sure you did. And it's funny because at that same time, my husband was growing up in El Salvador, and guess what his favorite song was? So Funky Town was an international smash hit. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I don't understand why myself, but it was a piece of American culture, one of the many that made it around the world for sure. He only had a radio. He grew up without TV, which is why he has a wonderful imagination. He had to imagine everything. Like my dad, growing up without TV, I think gives you an advantage when it comes to storytelling. You don't rely on the image as much. You know how to create one out of words, which is what you did a beautiful job with right now. I'm picturing these ladies. I don't know if they had sarongs, but I'm picturing something like a Hawaiian outfit dancing to Funky Town. These gray-haired ladies. Yep. That's a beautiful word picture. So then you and Mark, where did you get married?
So we fell in love quickly. We had both at different times. I had prayed that God would, whoever He had in mind for me, that He would lead me to the person I was supposed to marry, and and so we felt that God brought us together, and isn't this amazing? Because we decided very quickly that we would get married. We got married a year from basically our first date, although I didn't consider it a date. I was just going snorkeling, and it's funny, I didn't like him at first, and then I quickly changed my mind, and I'll just quickly cut to the quick here. I could get too carried away with a long story, but we moved to Portland, Oregon. I got a master's there. I had taken a year of journalism, so I was in social work, and I was just writing as a hobby because I always liked writing from the time I was a little kid. So I got a master's in public administration. I worked in the field. We ran a group home for delinquent boys together. We became Jesuit volunteers in Montana on the Flathead Indian Reservation. And Mark had worked in radio, so we went there. And we had an up and down marriage quite a bit. Excuse my cough. And we also were, I say we weren't cafeteria Catholics. We were on a starvation diet because we just didn't, we were kind of apathetic. We actually went to Mass once in a while. I was never anti-Catholic. I just didn't see the necessity of going to Mass every Sunday. And so I would pray, if there was something I was worried about, maybe I would quickly send up a prayer, but I wasn't very devout. I didn't really understand the faith. And because I didn't understand it, I was influenced by the culture, didn't understand a lot. And as I began to understand more, and I was really drawn in, as a kid I really liked Our Lady of Fatima and Our Lady of Lourdes, and I had read about them, and I started realizing, I should say the Rosary every day. And we had
wait. This
children.
is before you went to weekly Mass. You were still not going to Mass on a regular basis?
Around that time, we started realizing we can't. Well, we started going more often.
Okay.
So we started going frequently. We went from going infrequently to frequently.
Many a regular Catholic won't pray the Rosary every day. That's quite a step. One that not many have made that step.
But I didn't even know how to pray the Rosary until my early 30s, and so, and around that time I realized, because maybe we had company, maybe we were camping. Even though we mostly went to Sunday Mass, there were some days we said, you know what, it's just not going to work out this Sunday, and then we didn't go. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't until around the time I started praying the Rosary every day, and I realized there is no excuse to miss. We just need to go to Mass on Sundays, and that was that. And then we started doing a weekly Rosary on Wednesdays. We would say that was our day to say a family Rosary, and we already had 4 kids, and the culture acts like you're out of your mind having that many, and a lot of times they treat you that way, and so I really insisted, that Mark have a vasectomy, and this is why I say we have to be careful. We don't judge people. We need to know right from wrong, but you don't go from A to Z in one step. And so even though the pieces were starting to come together for me, I still lacked a lot of understanding. And it didn't help that we had a doctor in Kalispell, Montana, Dr. Stan, who was also Father Stan. He was a priest and a doctor. And his bishop had given him... Right. No, that's not why, because we moved from Ronan to Kalispell, which is a small city. So
it's unusual to have a priest doctor.
It is. He was a priest first, and he always wanted to be a doctor, and he got permission from his bishop to go to medical school. And he had a friend, an old friend from college, and they were in practice together. They had a medical practice, and then he was part-time at the church. So it was a regular medical practice. He wasn't helping the poor, but the income he made, I think, then went to help support the church and who knows what else. However, this man, who was a priest and a doctor, said that it's not realistic to expect Catholic couples to obey the church on everything or the Pope on everything. And he prescribed birth control pills. He did not have a problem with contraception. He prescribed it. And I recently emailed him. He didn't email me back. He eventually went to Spokane, and he had a pregnancy center named after him. But as far as I can tell, he never changed and repented. I mean, this man was prescribing birth control, the pill, and those can even be abortifacients that a lot of people don't realize.
Yeah.
And it's a serious, grave sin. And so, anyway, I did not see a big deal about pressuring my husband to have a vasectomy. I figured, well, I already had 4 children. I had 4 pregnancies. And the vasectomy is an easier surgery than a tubal. So I said, well, he has to do it. And he resisted. In the meantime, here we are praying a rosary. I'm praying a rosary every day. Mm-hmm. So,
but you had a priest tell you it was reasonable. You had a priest tell you. See, this is why a lot of Catholics aren't as culpable as they might be, because they got some bad advice. I had nuns telling me in high school that birth control was perfectly fine and don't listen to the old man in Rome, quote unquote. So, yeah, when you get that kind of advice, it's very confusing. That's why I am sympathetic to a lot of Catholics who are kind of shocked that you're actually supposed to obey Humanae Vitae and not use contraception, because that's the last thing they heard. And you would have to have read it yourself to hear it sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even know there was a teaching. I didn't understand it. If you're not even going to Mass, and there wasn't Catholic radio or TV, I didn't have any kind of Catholic publications. I didn't know anything. And I'm sorry to say that most of the priests who spoke out on Humanae Vitae were the ones in rebellion. You didn't ever get, even when I started going to church, I never I never thought it was a problem at all. And so, and I feel my heart goes out to so many people who thought it was okay and then years later find out, and by then it's too late,
right.
You know, that maybe they would have liked to have more children, or, you know, and I know a lot of people do that feel that, we didn't get the full information. We didn't have full knowledge.
That's right.
So, anyways, somebody asked me once, what changed your mind? How did you come around? And I said, you know, what's funny is I eventually homeschooled for 19 years, and our kids went to the Catholic high school. But to start, I had a couple kids at the Catholic school when the older ones were younger, and the little one would take a nap, and then Mark came home. He worked the early shift in the radio station, and he would take a nap. So I had a little time where I would write. That was my hobby, so I'd write articles. And then I decided, hey, as long as I'm going to pick up the kids from school, I should go a little bit early and stop off and pray in front of the Blessed Sacrament. I'm right at the church, and I always knew that was a good thing to do. So I used to stop off and pray every day at the Blessed Sacrament. And I think by being in front of the Eucharist, the true presence of Jesus, I started realizing that I was wrong to have pressured my husband, and who am I to dictate to him, you know, what if I had died and he wanted to get remarried and have more children, and now he couldn't, and he was the one that was kind of against it. So I started praying for whatever God's will was. I thought, you know, people have failures all the time, and we were actually looking into adoption. We thought, well, there's children that need homes. We were thinking of foreign adoption.
He had the operation or didn't? He didn't have
it. He had a vasectomy.
He did. Oh, he did.
And
okay.
All along we thought, well, we could adopt from other countries. There's a lot of children that need homes.
Sure.
So, I thought, we already had 4. I've done my part. Now let's look. Maybe we could do a foreign abortion. Abortion. We were talking about that earlier, you and I, off the air.
Yeah.
Adoption. I thought we could do a foreign adoption, and we were looking into that, and we were also looking at in minorities. Sometimes they are not as easy to find placements for. So we were looking at a lot of different adoption possibilities, but I kept feeling like something was wrong. And I said, you know, it's like when you have a magnet and you put the opposite poles together. Mm-hmm. We even met with somebody from Catholic Charities, and it felt like this wasn't the way we were supposed to go. And mm-hmm. I thought, but how are we going to have more children then? Because we decided we were going to adopt. Well, I had a dream one night, and in it there were 2 more babies, and I realized they were supposed to be ours. And I had such a love for those babies, but I also realized I was never going to have them because, you know, I had pressured Mark, and he had
mm-hmm.
had a vasectomy. Mm-hmm. And so I realized, okay, he has to have a reversal.
Wow.
But when he came home from work that day, I looked up information on it. I called some doctor. I don't know which doctor. I guess I must have called my doctor and asked information on reversals. And so he came home from work, and I said, sit down, I want to talk to you about something. And I brought up a reversal, and he immediately was like, no way, absolutely not. You talked me into this. And I mean, really, don't I sound like I'm a little schizophrenic? I pressured him to have it, and I'm like, okay, now I want you to have a reversal. But it was a spiritual journey for me where I realized what I had done was wrong only through the Holy Spirit, only through my prayer life and this deep awareness. And then, but once I had that dream, I thought, he had to do this. This is what we were supposed to do. He would not hear of it. And it's like, nope, subject closed. So earlier, there's so many parts of the story. Earlier, he had prayed that we would have another child when Father Stan had prescribed birth control pills to me. And there was something wrong. They weren't working. I just stopped taking them. And then I got pregnant. Well, Mark had been praying that he had been praying that we would have another child. And when I got pregnant with the number 4, he said, oh, I've been praying for this. And I said, are you serious? You were praying behind my back? And I thought it was funny. And, you know, so we had our 4th, and I was happy with that. So I thought, okay, now it's my turn to pray behind his back. And I said, Lord, I just want to do whatever your will is. And Mark was thinking too, well, people have, you know, they have these surgeries and they fail, and we could have more children if that's what God wants. But we were expecting, okay, God, if that's what you want to do, you go ahead and do that. You know, we're open to.
Okay.
But once I had that dream, I realized God doesn't work that way. Like, changed my mind. Hey, can you fix this for me? I realized he needed to have a reversal. And I began praying and put it in God's hands. And a couple months later, after Mass one Sunday, we went out for breakfast with the kids. And he said, I can't go in for a reversal this month, but I can next month. I was like, what? Are you serious?
Holy Spirit was working in that Mass. Oh, wow.
Well, you know, we're at breakfast with 4 little kids. So, you know how you can talk in a way that they don't know what you're saying. So it's like, you knew they would have no clue, and they're coloring their little menus.
No, of course.
And he goes, I'm like, wow. He goes, and so that would have been January. We were out for December, and I was like so excited, and I was telling them stuff about it, you know, how much it costs, because lo and behold, insurance doesn't pay for that. They pay for
naturally
vasectomies, but they don't pay for reversals. And we didn't have any money, by the way. Not that we do now, but we were economically disadvantaged, and we didn't have. I mean, we qualified. We didn't know we were economically disadvantaged until all of a sudden Mark goes, "Hey, look at this chart. You realize, you know, because
the number of children you qualified for state aid and
right." And we lived on rummage sales, and we got by just fine. Anyways, so how we talked about it later, and I said, you know what, it doesn't matter. If this is what God has for us to do, we'll have to make payments or something, but we can't not do it. Anyway, on the way, I knew a lot about it, and he goes, how do you know all this? And I said, because there wasn't the internet back then, so I can't say I looked it up, but I had called, and I got the information, but you wouldn't listen to me because you said the subject was closed and you weren't going to talk about it. And on the way home, and, you know, and then we talked of other things with the kids, but on the way home, I said, Mark, what got you to change your mind? Why did you change your mind? He said, I had a dream last night, and in it were 2 babies that were supposed to be ours.
Was that the same night you dreamed it?
No, I had dreamed mine months earlier when I tried to, and I had never said anything to anybody.
Dream though, whoa.
Yep, and I mean, I knew my dream was powerful because I saw my children, and so I loved them like I love my, you know, just a natural innate love for your children, and to realize here are my babies that I will never see because I did the wrong thing. And so it was kind of funny because we had not really been, the kids couldn't really tell from any conversation really what we were talking about, and then we just talked about other things with them, and plus they're all chattering. But in the van, when I said, Mark, what changed your mind? And he said, I had a dream and I saw 2 babies. And I said, I had the same dream. A little voice from the back of the van goes, we're going to have twins. So if somebody was listening, and they knew that we both had a dream that we saw 2 babies that God had for us. So anyways, we had Mary and then Teresa.
Oh, beautiful.
Mark had the vasectomy. Like a month and a half later, I was expecting. We named her after the Blessed Mother.
A month and a half after the reversal. Praise God. Wow.
Yeah. It was like a month and a half, 2 months at the most. Because I remember the very first month, I was disappointed I wasn't pregnant. I thought, oh, my goodness, I already have 4 kids, and here I am all upset. But by the next month, so we had 4 more children after that. And then we adopted 2 from Kenya, 2 boys that were AIDS orphans. One is now, they came to us in high school. First Calvin came, and then 3 years later, his younger brother joined us. There were 3 in the family. He has an older brother married with children who had kind of had to drop out of school to take care of them after the parents died. And then so Calvin is a doctor now. He's an anesthesiologist. And Josh has a degree, and he's in the Marines and married with a 4-year-old.
Wow. Praise God. And
they were malnourished and having a tough time of it. Yeah.
Stories at the AIDS orphans are heartbreaking.
Yeah, because they don't have anybody to take care of them.
No, there's no safety net like we have here. That's really a beautiful story, how you listened to God. First you didn't, and then you did, and how patient God was at bringing you and then your husband around. So I imagine so many patient. Couples can relate to that, Patty, the disagreements over family size and whatnot.
Not only that, we've spoken here and there on it, and we have people. We spoke years ago at Rockford, Illinois, shared our story, and Mark and I both had the same experiences. People were coming up to us separately. Like I was in the ladies' room over by the sink, and some woman came up to me and whispered, "I just want you to know, I've been wanting to have my husband have a reversal, and he's refused. But after we sat and listened to you talk, he said, okay, honey, I'll do it." And we were both having that experience of people coming up to us telling us that. And we've even received pictures. A couple of people sent pictures of the babies that were born.
As a result of your talk and the grace of God.
Yes, yes. And I've written about it a few times. It was in a magazine article once. And a lot of people, like my dad had called and said, boy, thinking here I am talking about something so personal. And even somebody sent the article, they copied it, sent it to our bishop, who wrote me a note and said, boy, you really let it all hang out. And I thought, you know what? I didn't get personal. I didn't say anything that you shouldn't, that you couldn't read to children. Right. But the fact, and when my dad had called, because, that generation was like, oh, you don't talk about those things. I said, Dad, I could be standing at the grocery store, and the person in front of me can be saying, oh, I'm going to get fixed, tomorrow. So I'm
nobody blinks
an
eye.
Groceries. Nobody thinks anything. I said, if people like I don't speak out, then nobody stops to think there's anything wrong with it, or they don't stop and think about not doing it. He goes, yeah, you're right. And so, and a lot of times for a lot of people, it's too late. They're past childbearing age, and they might. And I thank God that He was patient with me, that in my ignorance, and I have to have some kind of responsibility for my ignorance. I mean, some of it I was led astray, but if I had been a holier person, if I prayed more, if I had a desire to serve God more, maybe I would have been. If I had listened to my husband who didn't want to do it, I certainly have blame on my shoulders in a number of different ways, but I was ignorant also, and there were contributing circumstances that led to my ignorance. So I recognize that there's a lot of other people that don't know any better, that never even heard of such a thing, that there was something wrong.
So thank you for speaking out on it. I didn't expect to go here with our conversation, and it's a wonderful topic because it is relevant to so many people. When my husband and I were married, the nuns had helped me adopt the mindset of the world that it's anti-women to avoid, through natural family planning, the fertile period of a woman's cycle. And because that's apparently when she is most eager to participate in the marital act. So I had adopted that attitude, and my husband converted me and took me to a natural family planning taught by the Archdiocese. Interestingly enough, half the couples out of 100 that were there were trying to get pregnant because they had used hormonal birth control, and it lowered their fertility. Very interesting. So that half the couples there were trying to become fertile again. And it's not a given. If you take hormonal birth control, you're telling your system you're pregnant for however many years you've used it. You're faking it out. And it doesn't always kick right back in when you want it to, and there's some suffering there too. So there's a lot of suffering related to not following Humanae Vitae. And Pope Paul VI, if you read the 67 pages, it's a very short encyclical, goes into it in very telling detail, very prophetic detail, that women will be used as objects, that governments will force fertility or lack of fertility on the people in the nation, like China with the one-child policy.
And India really.
India too, right. So China's opened it up to 2 children, but there's still the idea that the government runs your fertility.
Yeah.
And that is something that without birth control obviously wouldn't be possible. So, and the general loosening of morals, and the fact that women are very angry at the Me Too movement for having been in casual sexual encounters where their feelings are not taken into consideration. All this wreckage, and of course abortion, as a result of having sterile sex and expecting what you thought was sterile sex and expecting no child to come of it. As Janet Smith is fond of saying, getting pregnant is the object of sex, and it seems to be that many people think that's that's actually shocking when you say that. I said that in an interview with a pro-abortion magazine, and the girl almost dropped her pen. Like, how can you say that? I said, well, that's what it was intended for. It's a natural occurrence when you have, of course, to have babies. And how could you say that? That's radical. I said, actually, no, that's how things work. And a lot of women, that's how it's supposed to work.
They think you're insane, and oh my gosh, can you believe Leticia thinks
this
is, but
how medieval of you.
And we've been sold that, no, sex is for recreation. I mean, you have to go to, if you want a child, well, that's a whole nother level. I mean, there's a certain number of people in certain relationships that might actually want to have a child, but sex is just about having fun. And as a result, women have suffered. You're used as objects. If you get pregnant, that's your problem and your fault, and you take care of it. The man doesn't feel responsible because he was just having sex with her. He didn't see himself as being responsible in any way.
And he had no idea of a future with her, right. And many times the woman didn't either, but now she has a future with this child, either aborted or alive, that will stay with her forever. And as I say to the women, I worked at a pregnancy center, there's no easy way out of being pregnant when you're all by yourself. Having an abortion has consequences. Having a baby has consequences. Adopting a child, nothing is easy from where you are, but you must choose the best path. And, of course, killing is never the best path.
Well
said. Speaking of abortion, let's talk about Our Lady of Guadalupe. I know Patty for several years, and around the time of the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe, almost 2 weeks ago now, I noticed that she had a wonderful article on the Roses of Guadalupe and why they were so there are many miracles about Our Lady of Guadalupe, but could you talk about that article you wrote for National Catholic Register?
Well, our family actually went to Mexico. The older kids kind of paid their way, and it was our 25th wedding anniversary, and our youngest was 4 years old. So we went and we saw the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and she is pregnant, and she's also dressed as a princess, as royalty, and also dressed as a single woman. So
oh, really? I never heard that before.
Yeah, by a lot of the symbolism. And if you go to my article...
Her clothing denotes that. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and the colors, I think it might be the color of her sash around her waist is what
but the fact that
she's
she
single.
has a sash means that she's, as the Spanish say, encinta, in belts. Literally, they say the word in belt. It's an old-fashioned term for pregnant.
Okay, yep. So you know a lot of that.
Yeah, so the fact that she had the belt meant that she's pregnant. Wow. So the Aztecs understood that she was single and she was pregnant.
And that's why. And we have a life-size image blessed by Pope John Paul II, and it's got his insignia on it by both him and the Bishop of Mexico. We have a life-size one that's framed in our. We bought. It was one of the ones when Pope John Paul II had gone there because he went to Our Lady of Guadalupe shrine more than any other shrine.
Yeah.
And I don't remember how many times he was there, but when he was there, he blessed a lot of these images, and so we. My husband, Mark, gives PowerPoint presentations. He gives a beautiful presentation on Our Lady of Guadalupe. So I've learned a lot through him. And there's a lot of, within 9 years, 9 million Mexicans converted to the Catholic faith because the image was so powerful. All they had to do was look at it, and she was royalty because of the colors and the way she was dressed. But and the sun god was behind her. The sun god was the greatest god. It was the most. And so, but she was royalty, but there was someone greater than her because her head is bowed down. And she was standing on. There's like it looks like a devil. People wonder, like, what is she standing on? An owl, or there's horns and being carried. And she was standing on the. I'm going to go stand in front of my image right now so I can kind of look at it.
Moon? I see
she would see it. The moon. Right. The moon god, the sun god was like the greatest god. The moon god was the god, kind of a dark god that they were doing all the human sacrifice to. And she was standing on top of it. And so she's looking down. The sun is behind her. So there's someone greater than her. And she's reverent. Her hands are folded. And that was a symbol of ending the human sacrifice that was going on. And they converted, because conversions, this is why I love this story, and I did the story of the roses, because Bishop Zimaraga from Spain was frustrated that conversions were happening at a snail's pace. And because there was greed, and the Spanish military was there, and they were treating the Mexican people harshly, and so the religion was not really growing. People were not being attracted to it. They were not interested. And so the bishop saw that as a problem. He was even concerned that there would be an uprising against Spain, because they were, many of them, not the missionaries who came there very selflessly. As a matter of fact, there's a Blessed Sebastian. When we were there, we saw his incorrupt body laying out under glass. So there were some very saintly men who sacrificed for the faith. But the harsh treatment of the Spanish was not selling anybody, and there were still Aztecs in the Mayan culture that had promoted human sacrifice, even though they had outlawed it. And so after Our Lady of Guadalupe appeared, but the bishop had prayed, and he wrote in his journal that he asked the Blessed Mother for help, and he asked for a sign. He asked for roses as a sign that she would help him. And so the roses are a very personal answer to prayer to the bishop. We know that when Juan Diego was had the apparition of the Blessed Mother on Tepeyac Hill, who asked him to build a church in her honor, and he went to the bishop. Well, bishops can't believe everybody who says I had a vision.
I had a vision, right.
And so then it happened a second time, and he went back again to tell the bishop this message. And so the bishop said, well, ask her for a sign then. If this is real, ask her for a sign. So it was on the third time, and he was late. He was with his uncle, who was sick, and so he didn't go back the next day. And he was a little concerned, like, I didn't come back, and is she going to be mad at me? And so she appeared the third time, and she told Juan Diego that his uncle, I think it was Bernardine, anyways, his uncle would be healed, and they checked and compared later. He was healed right at that time. And she took him, Juan Diego explained that the bishop needed a sign before he could build a church. So she took him over to the part of the hill where there were roses, and she told him to take these roses back to the bishop, and she helped him place them in his tilma. So when he had the roses, it was in December. They were Castilian roses from Spain, which did not grow in Mexico. And she helped him put them in his tilma, which he bundled up, which was a wrap that he would put made of cactus fibers, which normally disintegrates within 20 years. And that image in the tilma, the fact that the tilma has lasted for over 500 years, that alone is miraculous, because it should not still be intact at all, but that's what the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe is on. So he filled up the tilma with the roses. And when he went back to see the bishop the third time, he had something, and the guards were kind of curious, but he kept it closed. He wasn't going to show anybody until he got in. And when he got inside with his sign, and the bishop was there, and there's an image. We have a copy of this. Years later, they would eventually magnify her iris or her eye, and you would see the reflection of the bishop and two other men standing in the room, just like you would in an eye. Yeah, because there was no technology for that.
Nobody would have known that to paint it, even if they could paint it. It's amazingly small. Yeah, that just blew my mind. I heard that from a Mexican that I met one time, and he told me that story.
Right. You wouldn't have known. You wouldn't have had the know-how. You didn't have the technology at that time. It would come years later. And so you can see in that, when you have that magnified, that they were in the room. So there were three people in the room, including the bishop. And when he opened up the tilma, so the roses fell out, that's when everybody, they were in awe. I think they dropped to their knees and saw the image of the Blessed Mother. So the roses became small in comparison to this miraculous image had been imprinted on his tilma. Mm-hmm. And so often we forget the roses. We think of the roses as it was a way to get in mm-hmm. to see the bishop, and then what was revealed was that the miraculous image of Our Lady of Guadalupe. But I wanted to do a story, explaining that part of the story, but I wanted to do a story on how significant those roses were, that the bishop had asked for a sign, and the Blessed Mother gave him that sign through the roses, and he got something far bigger. Right. And during this time in the 1500s, what was happening in Europe? Right. And about, they estimate maybe, 9 or 10 million people left the faith, and the same number of people then in 9 years became Catholic, and that you just think there's a certain balance that mm-hmm. happened, and I hope she is the patroness of the Americas, and she is the patroness of the unborn.
And unfortunately, we're going to have to unpack that in a future episode. We've come to the end of our hour. How quickly time flies listening to you, Patty. You're a great storyteller. And Patty Maguire Armstrong is available as a speaker. You can go to her author speaker page to hear more of her wonderful stories. Our Lady of Guadalupe has also been taken as the patroness of the unborn because she's expecting and because she was single, and also when abortion was legalized in Mexico City, there are some who say, and I saw a picture of it, there were lights in her womb where Jesus is in the image. You don't see him, but there were lights that no one could explain. They kept trying to make them go out in her womb at the time. It may have been a miracle that Our Lady was trying to communicate through her image how she felt about babies being sacrificed in Mexico City. By and large, Latin America hasn't remained abortion-free, but that's being eroded by largely international organizations paid for by the United States. Thankfully, President Trump defunded them, his first action as president, from American dollars directly. But we're still spreading abortion, unfortunately, throughout the world in places like Ireland and Latin America. So thank you so much for coming on, Patty, and sharing your story of being a mother of 10 kids and a fulfilling career.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's been a delight. Thank you so much for having me on. It has been. It's been a blessing. Thank you, Leticia.
And next time you have some time, you come on again and we'll unpack that story a little more. It is very, very beautiful and deep how Our Lady interceded in the lives of Latin America. And my husband, being from Latin America, El Salvador, has benefited from that. All of us have, from the grace of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And my family also went down to the Basilica, my parents did, and got a copy of that beautiful tilma, and we have it in our home. In fact, she's the icon of my radio show. Her image.
Okay, perfect.
And you didn't even know that, right? So thank you for celebrating that. Thank you for celebrating Our Lady of Guadalupe a couple of days late, and have a blessed Christmas this week.
Oh, thank you.
And we look forward to speaking with you in the new year about, Patty's done an amazing breadth of interviews from women who've had abortions, and we'd like to talk about that as well and how it hurts women. That would be something that we could talk about in the future. And some of your upcoming projects. And I'm definitely going to get me a copy of those Holy Hacks, and we'll talk. Maybe we'll have read it by the next time we talk. Hopefully.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, anytime, Leticia. It's a pleasure.
It's coming in February, Holy Hacks by Ave Maria Press.
Right.
All right. So everybody look for that. You can't get it for Christmas, but you could give it to someone. You could read it for Lent.
Oh, you can pre-order it, though. It's for sale now.
Oh, it is? Oh, wonderful. Fantastic. Yes. So that's a good idea. Go to Ave Maria Press, and you can pre-order it. And I review books at Ave Maria Press, so I know I'll be getting it. And I'm definitely looking forward to it because I want to incorporate more of God in my life. And I always say I'll do it tomorrow. And maybe with your simple ideas, I can do something today.
Absolutely, yes.
All right, I look forward to that. God bless you, and we'll talk in the new year.
Well, God bless you too, Leticia. Thanks for everything.
Bye-bye now.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.